Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. I am truly excited today. I know what you guys are saying. Andre, you're always excited. Well, you got to be. The universe is designed to make you happy, and you have to bring happiness into my universe because I create my own universe, and my universe is full of happiness. And nothing could be more powerful today than what I created for my universe, and that was to have this young man on my show. Let me take you down a journey, down the rabbit hole a little bit before we introduce our guest. I love movies, and I always tell people movies have a way of telling us what life really is about, whether it's through telling it through somebody else's lens or somebody else's telling your story. You're going to get some enlightenment, some kind of way, shape, form, or fashion, because the universe is designed to almost be a Hansel and Gretel type journey. The breadcrumbs are going to be there. You just have to know when to pick them up or when to leave them there. I was watching a movie called The Shack. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard about it. It came out several years ago. Very, very impactful movie. I was told to watch it several times because the first time I didn't get it. Second time I didn't get it. Maybe a third time I didn't get it. Let's be honest. But by the time I watched it enough, something started to resonate. It really resonated when the documentary portion came on at the end, and I sat there and watched because the documentary part was the actual creator, the guy that wrote the movie script himself. And by listening to his story, I couldn't turn the TV off. I watched it. It was lengthy, but it was good. And I wanted more. And I kept asking for more. And when he ended, I was a little pissed because I'm like, okay, you're leaving us with a cliffhanger. And so I reached out to the universe. And I remember saying this as I was watching. I said, I'm going to have him on the show. And we're going to talk about not only his journey, but the meaning behind writing that movie itself. I am pleased and honored to have in my universe, I can now call him my friend, the one, the only, Paul Young. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Honored to be here. One little correction. I did not write the script. And I was peripherally involved, but that was at the heart and hands of others. And I wrote the book, but not the script.
Whatever part you played in it, it was magnificent.
Thank you, sir. I really liked how they did it because it's a very hard book to translate to screen.
Right,
And
right.
they did a job. Yeah.
Before we get started,
Yeah.
tell the viewers a little bit about who Paul Young is before we get deep into your life in the book and the movie itself.
Paul Young is a kind, gracious, long-suffering lover of human beings. He absolutely adores his family and all the grandkids that have come into my world. Kim and I am the husband of Kim, and she and I are the best we've ever been. And almost 45 years now. She paid a high price for my healing unfairly, and but she did. And I call her, tongue in cheek, but it's kind of true, I call her the wrath of God. And she and her 5 sisters are called the Force in our family. And if the Force is with you, life will be good and much easier. But if the Force is not with you, you better pay attention because something has been brought to the surface in your life that needs to be addressed and healed.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm a missionary kid, preacher's kid, firstborn. Grew up in the highlands of New Guinea. Didn't know I was white till I was sent to boarding school, and it was a huge disappointment. And then back to Canada, Canadian born. My father was an itinerant preacher when we got back, 13 schools before I graduated high school. Porn addict by the time I'm 12. At 38, after our sixth child was born, Kim caught me in a 3-month affair with one of her best friends. And that started an 11-year dismantling, rebuilding journey,
Mhm.
of which Kim was central. Part of why I'm as whole as I am is because of her fury. It took her and I 11 years to actually reconcile. And I'd never want to go through that again, but I'm grateful every day for it.
Wow,
There you go.
7 years. Go back a little bit. You mentioned something that we still struggle with to this day. You didn't realize that you was a Caucasian race until much later. What was it like in New Guinea, correct?
Yeah.
What was that
New,
like
New
growing
Guinea
up?
at the time. Yeah. Well, New Guinea is a very unusual place. There's over 800 unrelated language groups. And I was a year old when we went into one of them. And that was my first dreaming language. And so at 5, I was the informer for the translators that came in to make it a written language. 40 to 60,000 members of that tribal culture.
Mhm.
Never seen a white person before. We had a word for white people, and it was a mungat, which means a ghost person, because universally ghosts are white.
Okay.
And the definition was a being without substance, and that's a ghost person. So for me, sexual abuse began at 5, and then when I was sent to boarding school, it was older boys on younger boys, and so that became a real disruptive thing. Losing my color and culture at the age of 6, that's when I was sent away. Um, Losing a sense of identity, and then, kind of being thrown out into a world I could not understand. All
Oh, when
those
you say,
things.
when you say losing your identity,
Yeah.
you hear that a lot with people of color. You don't really resonate that coming from someone that's of white. Could you elaborate on that a little bit
Yeah.
more?
Sure. You know, White is such a combination of so many cultures, and it's kind of lost its roots. There are some still, you have your Irish, you have your, Jewish community, you have your different variations on white, but for the most part, it's just become a gathering spot for many different historical cultures. The Black community is still Black, and so it has its depths, it has its music, it has its art, it has its roots, his history. So there is something that is very specific. And for me, growing up in a very brown culture and identifying with it, because that's where I was raised. My parents were busy doing the missionary thing,
Mhm.
and with the best of intentions, and I was raised brown, and like I said, it's my first dreaming language. It's um, it's just the frame of reference, and for me to find out that it wasn't real was such a shocker. And so my identity was built in terms of my history. And although it wasn't a long history, 5, 6 years.
Right.
And uh, and so to lose that was to lose my moorings. And then to be dropped back and just under 10 years old into a Canadian white culture, that was a world that I did not understand at all. And
How's that? Why is
so,
that, Paul?
yeah.
What?
Well, because because it was the middle of winter. I'll give you an example, a couple. One is they took us to a mall, never seen a mall, and didn't understand a mall. And two things happened. We were looking at this little room where the doors closed, and then people went in it, and they came out totally different. It happens to be an elevator, but we just had no concept for an
Right.
elevator.
Okay. Okay.
And another thing happened. An African American man walked through the mall and suddenly was attacked by 4 kids, all speaking to him in Donnie because he's the closest thing to home that we'd seen,
Right.
coming to a different culture. So here's a beautiful thing about it, though. When you are dropped into a culture you don't understand, you don't know the assumptions.
Right.
The assumptions that are underlying the culture are never talked about. They're assumed. And so when you don't know it, you start asking the questions about those assumptions, and people get very skitterish. And and so because they're not used to having their assumptions questioned. So there is the religious assumptions, there's the assumptions of how you're supposed to act, the questions you're not supposed to ask. And we don't know.
Right.
And so there's a great value in those who challenge the assumptions. And that's part of the value of culture. I love a multicultural world, but I'm not fond of an assimilation world.
You
And
said you said your family were doing mission work.
yeah.
What when you say mission work, were they trying to were they what exactly did that detail? Because you would know better
Okay.
than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were modern evangelical fundamentalists. And with the best of intentions, they were trying to um, help people understand a narrative about life that was centered on the person of Jesus. Part of the problem was there wasn't a great deal of distinction between the person who is love and their American culture. So a lot of times what mission has done, it has not led people toward the love and kindness of the kingdom of God, or however you want to put it. They actually led them towards um, a change in culture, and it didn't protect the cultures that they came from. And this is true whether it's, an Islamic world or a Jewish world or a Buddhist world, is that a lot of times it's the overlay of culture, and it did a lot of damage, huge amount of damage.
Like what?
And rather than being led toward love, they were led toward a change in culture. And it was, again, it was done with the best of intentions. It was just so blindly done, it wasn't challenged. And
Said it left a lot of damage. Like what kind of damage?
well, suddenly you're dividing individuals from their own family because you're telling them that they're no longer a part of that culture. So, for example, in the Muslim world, um, Western missionaries tried to get people to move from their Muslim culture into Western culture, and and underneath it, all kinds of people were going like, "Why would we want to do that? We're the ones that brought you art and science and beautiful things, and then you turned around and committed genocide against us." So it's a clash between cultures rather than you can talk to a Muslim person and ask them about the kingdom of God as transcending culture. And they know what a person who is moving in the direction of love and goodness and kindness, what their lives look like. Or, you've got those elements of both the Western culture, say, and the Muslim culture that are centered on violence and territory and a scarcity mindset and competition and comparison and separation, which is not the movement towards something that is unifying and beautiful and good and right. And so, yeah, it did a lot of damage. And we even had we even pitted family member against family member. There was a young girl that came out to Portland area for a year as a foreign exchange student, Buddhist family, raised Buddhist, um, went to the Buddhist temple every Sunday with her grandmother. She wasn't He was kind of a nominal Buddhist, like a lot of young people are sort of nominal Christian or nominal Catholic or whatever. And but she was preparing to leave, and the shack had a huge impact on her life. And she mentioned to her host family father, if I had a bucket list, I'd like to meet the author of the shack. And so he knows me. So we
Right.
set up a surprise get together, and at Saint Arbuck's, I call it because it's the patron saint of staying awake in church,
Right.
Starbucks, St. Starbucks. And so she showed up and I showed up, and it was a great conversation for a couple hours.
Right.
And at the end of it, she said, I've got Christian friends that I really love who have started to say to me that they're going to be praying for me now that I've become a Christian so that I'll be able to take a stand when I go home. She said, I don't know what that means. And it's bothering me. And I said, oh, this is an easy one. She said, "This is easy." I said, "Yeah, just don't be a Christian. Be a Buddhist follower of Jesus."
Right.
And she said, "You're allowed to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, I even know Christians who are followers of Jesus." And but again, you saw the weight of the world lift off her shoulders because, I say Jesus wasn't even a Christian. So, you know, and this is the beauty. I said, ask, as you would say, the universe
Yeah.
about going to the Buddhist temple with your grandmother. You're not going to be going somewhere where, love is not,
Right.
and where people are not indwelt by love. So, I would put it, ask the Holy Spirit. You would put it, ask the universe, and it's like trust it. Trust what you sense in your heart and moves in the direction of love, because it's not about categorizing
Right.
and putting people into boxes. We've done that long enough, and it has not worked out very well.
When you come back to the United States, to Canada, how difficult was it for you to adapt? Because you're not in Guinea. You're now realizing that you're not a man of color. You got to fit in some kind of way as you start to develop into manhood. How difficult was that transformation? But more importantly, was anybody even interested in where you came from and the beliefs and how you were raised?
No, nobody was very interested because it was outside of their frame of reference completely. Here's how I adapted. I became a chameleon. I learned to live from the outside in. I didn't think that I had anything that was worthy of living from the inside out. So I became a different person depending on the audience. And it took me till I was 50 years old to deal with that kind of thing and come to a place of wholeness where I was the same person in every situation. And I was living from the inside out. Living from the outside in was fundamentally because I thought I'm just a piece of shit. That's what the reality of who I am. And
But what
so,
would make you think you're a piece of shit, knowing that both of your
oh,
parents come from a spiritual type environment? You know what I
my
mean?
dad, yeah, my dad was an abusive disciplinarian. That said that. Sexual abuse said that. Abandonment said that. Loss of culture said that. Right now, people would say, social media would say that. People's
Right.
opinions would say that. And my theology said that, which was wrong, but I didn't know it. It's the only thing that I knew. So God said that. God's, according to the theology, you have sin nature, you're totally depraved, as Martin Luther would say, all we are is snow-covered dung, shit. And so my whole frame of reference was you know, that I was here, my value was in being used, um, and I had no identity apart from that. I mean, so many of us live inside of as a friend of mine calls it, the I am nots. I am not good enough. I am not worthy, or I am a fake. I'm going to get exposed. And then fear drives us in that direction. So we become fake. We become people who are not authentic, and we don't know how to move in that direction. And in a big sense, the adultery that Kim caught me in, I either had to make a decision to see if there was a way to change or just kill myself
Did
because
you mean to it? I know this might sound eyesight 2020, but after looking at your documentary, I really don't think that, well, only you can answer this. Do you think in your mind that you really wanted to do that to Kim, or was it because you were still fighting the beliefs of the fear factors that have been instilled in you? I guess I'm trying to say that right. Like in your right frame of mind, you probably never would have done it because you can't love her as much as you're putting out without having second thoughts. In other words, for the years that you was having an affair with her best friend, how many times that moment set in to your subconscious? You say, you know what, this ain't right.
wow, three months, and I basically lost my mind. You know how there's a difference between real love and infatuation.
Yeah.
Infatuation is based on not knowing the person. If you suddenly are infatuated with someone, you're just projecting your own need. And the worst thing to do if you're infatuated is to actually get to know the person, because real love is based on real knowing.
Mm.
And so in terms of the adultery, it's kind of like porn in the flesh, right? And where suddenly you are projecting your need on someone. And so it really wasn't about caring or loving them either. It was about pushing your need for inclusion, your need for affection, your need for, you're just a black hole. I'm sorry, you're just a shaded hole. And and you know, I apologize. That's not a good phrase, and I normally don't use it because all of creation came out of a blackness, according to the Old Testament. So, um, so it was just sucking need, and and I didn't question it because I'd kind of just blocked everything. Kim was a real relationship, and as a result, there was real challenge and real questions, and uh, and there comes a point where if you're not dealing with your own stuff, you just you quit.
What was
And
the challenges what were the challenges? What was the real stuff that Kim was bringing into your life that you wasn't really willing to face?
oh, how about honesty? How about being a truth teller? And I was someone, for many of us, lying is a survival skill. It's not an attempt to deceive. Now, there are some people who use lies in order to gain power and control. But for many of us, we've been so harmed. When my dad would come at me, I would either shade the truth or lie to try to get away from the brutality, or I would yell at him, I'll be good, I'll be good, I'll be good, over and over and over. And that was just reinforcing, I am bad, I am bad, I am bad. But shading the truth became a survival skill. And I drug that into my relationships and specifically into my relationships with Kim. And she's got a great BS detector. And so, she was constantly pushing me about not shading the truth, not trying to manipulate people for whatever reason. And fundamentally, for me, it was trying to find a way to survive. And that's like suicide. Suicide is sort of the last way to run away before you have to, face the authenticity of a real relationship. And porn is like that. It's, for the most part, it's the imagination of a real relationship without the risks of a real one. And adultery is then.
Not to open up Pandora's box. You mentioned your father,
Oh,
and something about the movie really resonated. Matter of fact, I just got done doing a show prior to this one. I was sharing my joy for having you to come on the show, and I remember them asking me, "What part of the movies did you like when you watched?" I said, "The part where he had to encounter his father was one."
yeah,
What was that like for you as you got older and you came into your own universal well-being, or should we call it emotional stability, to go
sure.
back and talk with your dad? And what did you get from the impact that he put on that was weighed up on you through his emotions?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad, his father had, and I didn't know this for a long time, but his father had destroyed my dad's capacity to be a father and his father before him. So we're dealing with generational crap. But, when you grow up inside of that, you just think that he's telling you the truth and you deserve what you get and all of that. So as I got older, and I forgave him, but there is a journey that in forgiveness that takes time, and you realize that there are layers to it. And my dad died 2 years ago, and he was 92. On his 80th birthday, he really pissed me off. It was his 80th birthday, and sure enough, he blew things up. And but what I discovered after that, when I went for a walk, is that my dad didn't know the mines that I put in the minefield and then led him onto it. And they're called expectations. I expected him to change. I expected him to be my dad. I expected him to do the right thing. And he didn't have the capacity for it, but I still expected it. And finally, I allowed my dad to become something bigger than my dad. I let him become a human being. And dad is a subset of human being, right? It's human being is greater, which meant suddenly his story mattered, suddenly listening mattered, and letting go of the demand that he change so that I would be okay. And let me tell you that changed the world. Suddenly I'm listening to him. And 2 months before he died, um, I'm in a conversation with him,
Hmm.
and I always was the one that called and all of that. I was the one that pushed it, but now I didn't have any expectation. So um, I'm in it, and he starts his side of the conversation with this phrase, Paul, I need to tell you something. And that was a phrase that had been the phone calls that he had made to me. One was when my sister got pregnant out of wedlock and they drug her before the church and shamed her. The second one was when my 18-year-old brother was killed. And then the third one was when my 5-year-old niece was killed the day after her fifth birthday.
Hmm.
And so that's how he started the conversation. And he said, Paul, there's something that I need to tell you. And I just kind of, okay. And he says, no, you need to listen to me. This is really, really, really important. And I said, okay. He said, I need you to hear me. I am really, 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 really proud of you. I'm proud of the man you are. I'm proud of the father you are. I'm proud of the husband you are. I'm proud of the way you've touched the world. I'm proud of the way you love your enemies. He said, and I really, really love you. Now, if I'd still carried those expectations,
Hmm.
which are just expectations are just prophesied disappointments. If I'd have done that and he said that to me, my response would have been, well, it's about time. But I didn't have any expectations anymore. And when you learn to live without expectations, everything becomes a gift. And that became an incredible gift to me. And so we ended up in a place that I could not have imagined that we would end up in prior to that, letting him become a human being, which is more amazing and fantastic. And, I know that every human being is a story. I
Right.
mean, you know that. And so to allow that story to emerge and me to not try to control it, but to let it become the gift to me, changed everything.
When you look at the time that it took to get there with your father, what is the most important things that you took from your dad's story? Because it's so funny, Paul. I literally just did an interview and told somebody that's one of the things that we need as human beings. We lack, and that's the ability to listen and the ability to stop putting expectations on people. Because
Mm,
until people become human, this is how I look at it. Until people become awakening or human to understand who they are, we really don't listen.
no.
So when you're sitting there and you're talking with your dad, it took quite a bit of time. You're dealing with your own issues. What are some of the things that you take away from what your dad might have gone through that he
Uh,
shared with you in silence?
So the way I put it is I've got these two photo albums in my inside house. There's a photo album that I'm so used to going to, and
Hmm.
that is all the things my dad did that hurt me, all the ways that he failed me, all the expectations that he disappointed. And my friends on death row that I was talking to you about before we started this,
Hmm.
when I told them about this, they said, that's exactly the way we're treated in the justice system, right? We're only known for the worst day of our lives. So my dad was known for the worst days of his life. And it's like that's a vengeance system. There's no possibility of transformation or change.
Mhm.
And but I have this other little album. It's in the cobwebby little bureau, and I don't like to go and look at that until now,
Right.
but because it's got all the things my dad did right. And it's got the fact that he was a great storyteller and children love to listen to his stories. The fact that I spoke at this one church, and as we're going out the door, like so many churches, you shake the hand of every person. My dad leaned over and said, "That was the best talk I've ever heard." See, and I put that in this other because it contradicted all the times that he hurt me,
Right.
right? One of the things that are in that is what a hard worker he was. I mean, he would go out in the middle of the night to help somebody. And so that's in this photo album. So now when I let go of expectations, suddenly the one I'd go to all the time lost its power. And I found out that I was inside the frame of those photographs and locked into it as much as I locked my dad into it. And
Wow.
suddenly these little things became more and more available. And now I'm seeing my father through those things that are in him that are good and right and glorious and magnificent. And again, that changed the whole way that I looked at my dad.
Wow. That's
And I'm a hard worker because my dad was a hard worker. I'm a
that's
good storyteller
yeah,
because my
that's
dad.
what we're getting ready to talk about. Tell me how the book came to be. Because that's the book is actually not to take credit from the movie, but I thought the book was much more in depth than
Yeah. Well, it has to be. I mean, you got 2 hours or an hour and 40 minutes or something for a movie. I mean, how can you distill, especially when there's so much conversation taking place in the book? So the book came about, and I don't have a history of being an author. It wasn't on my bucket list. I didn't intend to ever be a published author.
the.
So during the last part of those 11 years, every once in a while, Kim would say, someday as a gift for our kids, would you just write something that puts in one place how you think? Because you think outside the box. And she didn't tell me until later that she was actually thinking 4 to 6 pages. But I started writing this story because I had that year, I was working 3 jobs. Kim got a job at a high school bakery because we'd gone through an absolute financial collapse, which turned out to be one of the greatest gifts that we have ever received. And and so that's what I had for Christmas. And so on the train to one of my jobs, and it just was like I stepped in a river. And I got it done for Christmas and went down to Office Depot because it had a sale and you could get like 15 copies for the basic same price as 8.
Right,
And so I made 15 copies at Office Depot on their photocopier, put a little plastic cover and a little spiral thing on the side. And so 6 went to our kids. Kim and I kept the copy, and I had the extra. So I gave them to my friends. And I went back to work.
right.
And that was it. I wrote this thing for my children. And those 15 copies did everything I ever wanted that book to do. Everything. And so my identity is not in that book. It's not in the movie. I had the things that were settled in me in those at the end of those 11 years were identity and worth and value and significance and security and meaning and purpose and destiny, community, love. All of that was settled. What the book gave us is an invitation to walk on the holy ground of other people's stories. So all that's happened is, in your language, was the universe laughed. The universe laughed
When
and
you
said, all right, we can redeem all this
right
history.
when you got the offer to when you heard that they wanted to take this and put it on the big screen, what was that like for you?
Oh, well, that was an idea from the very beginning. Not my idea. It's the guys that helped me actually get the book into print because 26 publishers turned it down, and which didn't bother me.
Wait a
So
minute.
so
Wait a minute, Paul. 26 people turned it down?
yeah, 26 publishers. And the faith-based publishers thought it was too edgy, and the secular publishers thought it had too much Jesus in it. And neither of them knew where to put it in a store. And so I mean, I'm like, how hard is it to publish a book? And The guys down in California that I was talking about, they created their own publishing company in order to publish the book plus their own stuff. And from the very beginning, they wanted to make it into a movie. So when the timing was right, I gave them all the rights, all the creative control, and all the money. And because that's what I had said I would do.
Hmm.
So my identity is not in the movie, but I didn't think I'd be involved, but I got Gilnetter Productions and I got involved all the way along, which was a gift. I had no expectations. And again, when you live without expectations, everything's a gift. I I love movies like you. I I love art that slips past our watchful dragons. And when it's not propaganda, but it's like real art. It's like that painting behind you. There's so much going on in that, right?
Yeah.
Cities are upside down and if they should be grounded in the creative cosmos, the universe, right? So there's a lot going on behind you. And again, good art creates more space than it uses. And it's an invitation for people to listen and hear and see for themselves. And it's one of the reasons that I love theater because it's so three-dimensional. And we're actually working on creating a major theatrical musical play production of The Shack. And who knows, it'll take a few years to get there, but that's an incredible experience to be wrapped inside three-dimensional art. So I love the idea. And people would say, what if they make a really crappy movie? And I would say, again, using your language, if the universe has more to produce and good things to do out of a crappy movie, I'm in. Like,
Yeah. So, what's your favorite part of the book that you wrote? Are
mm,
there certain parts of the book that really resonate to you? And then the second part
yeah.
of that question is what 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 was the main what was the other focus? What should the people who read the book, what was the message that you was trying to send to them through your book?
Let I think you lost me. I'm not. Oh, there you are. Let me answer the second question first. I had none. I had no intention. I had no goal. I had no outcome in mind. Nothing. I was doing something because I love my kids and I was hoping to save them like 10 or 20 years of having to muddy their way through this whole part of their journey. And so I've never had an outcome in mind with regard to anything that I've written. It's never been about what is this going to do? Is it going to talk to this group of people or whatever? Nothing. Um, the parts that I really love in the book, and it depends, it's kind of like your kids. Which child do you love the most? Well, the one I'm thinking about.
Right.
And so, I mean, I love the cave scene. I love the garden. I love the scene with the father. My kids, when they read it, different parts of the book really impacted them at different times. And one of my sons, who's a mechanical engineer with an MBA and now a Portland, Oregon police officer, and he loves it. Um, he got blown away by that chapter, the one that you talked about. And the scene with the father was only a hope for me when I wrote it. It wasn't an accomplished thing. I wrote, I want this to happen. I want there to be reconciliation between me and my father, but it had not happened yet. And so my son, and there's part of the scene is where Jesus walks into this huge celebration, and Mac is on the hill, barely inside this celebration, which is what I felt like for a long time, just barely in, and you kind of feel like, hope nobody sees me. Um, but Jesus turns his eyes to Mac, and Mac hears him say, "Hey, Mac, I'm especially fond of you." And my son calls me up and he's bawling on the phone. He said,
Really?
I heard Jesus say that to me. And it was just, again, something in that scene. I have friends who read the book, 15 times and they go like, I didn't see this. And I'm like, well, you moved, the mountain's the mountain. And every time you move, you see something different. And that's
Yeah.
part of the beauty of it.
Yeah, that happened to me. I think the part of the movie, not the movie, but the movie in the book that I liked, that I thought was really creative, and I liked the way that they um, took the important people in his life and made it the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost of the Trinity. Like, did you have any say so in how all this stuff was constructed? Because that really blew my mind. I had to watch it several times, and it was funny how the universe works. I was like, I'm not understanding who these people are.
Ha,
That's
yeah,
exactly, look, Paul, that's exactly what I said. I said, I don't understand who these people are. And then
yeah.
it was when she took him to the garden, it resonated. And I was like, holy crap. I said, this dude is a genius on how he did this. Did you have any creativity in putting this together?
Well, of course. I mean, um, as the early church fathers would say, God will not be God apart from us. The universe will not be apart from us. And I love the whole idea of the Trinity, which means that, um, and I'm going to mix our words, the universe is not a force, it's personal. And if person has ever been alone, then love cannot exist. And so that's part of the beauty of three persons in the oneness of the universe and the oneness of God, is because relationship is at the core. Therefore, love is at the core. And I'm completely committed to that. So to have to to model this idea of relational and personal love inside this just worked for me. It just worked for me. And then we see it in our relationships with each other. We see it in terms of the friendships and the beauty of that. And also in the things that harm that. We are very aware of the things that harm love and harm goodness and harm kindness. And we know, like, that's not right. That's just not right. And the only thing that will defeat that kind of fear-based dysfunction of relationship is love. It's the only thing that will what will heal the human heart. And when that love is pushed out into creativity, you get really good art, you get play, you get adventure. But when fear drives us, you get worry and anxiety and you know uh, trying to stay a hold of territory and maintain power and all of those kinds of things, creating false personas and false imaginations. We start future tripping, and what there can't be healing in that. It just perpetuates something that is not right. And we're here to heal. We're not here to destroy. We're here to love one another, to love our neighbor, to love our enemy. And that's where the healing of all these divisions are. And you can recognize a false persona because it self-protects and self-promotes.
You
And
talked
you
about
know who you are.
you
You
talked
don't need
about
that.
you talked about healing, Paul, and you talked about fear and the fact that we as individuals, humans, spirits, are designed to create love, vibrational love. But when you look at your book and you look at the movie, how important was it to resonate him conquering the biggest fear, which was his daughter
Mm.
being taken away from him holding that 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 responsibility that it was his fault, and then more importantly, because I noticed in there that was a very difficult moment for him to do what you did with your father, to listen. I guess what I'm trying to say is how difficult was it to create that particular moment in that book and in the movie with
I
him?
bawled like a baby.
He had to face his enemy, not his enemy. He had to face what was troubling him, And then he had
Yeah.
to understand that he had to walk in his shoes, and then he had to forgive at the same time. That's a lot.
It is a lot. And I bawled like a baby. I just wept and wept and wept because, forgiveness is freedom. And and it's incremental and it's slow and it's arduous and it's painful and necessary because it frees the one who's been harmed and to start to move into their life with some sense of freedom. And you know, it's not about rights. It's about love. And it sounds wrong and it sounds because we don't know for the most part how to live in freedom. And I mean, freedom feels irresponsible. So it's about learning to let go in order to live. And freedom always feels irresponsible. So it's not attending to fear. It's not projecting imaginations that don't exist. It's about living moment by moment in the real world. Like the only real world that exists, Andre, is this one between you and me right now. This is the real world for you and I. And this is where love lives with us. This is where goodness is with us. Kindness is with us. Forgiveness is with us. It's not some imagination of it where you don't get grace today for things that don't exist. So it's moment by moment response to that which is actually in front of us, not trying to respond to the woes of the world and trying to be a savior and trying to be a fixer and trying to be the strong person. It's only a response to that which is in front of us.
I
And
love
whether it's taking out the garbage or loving our neighbor.
I love the way that you put a lot of your, I don't know if it was you or if it was the writers, but I love the way that the story was told, even to the point that it took you into the life of the perpetrator in there. That was like, you got the spirits telling him, okay, we understand what you're going through, but now we're going to shift this momentum and you're going to go into the perpetrator. And I was thinking to
Yeah.
myself, oh my God, how did he even come up with now that's walk in somebody else's shoes? You may not
Yeah.
understand why they did it. You may hate what they did, but how can I put it? There's a purpose for everything.
Well, there's a story, and we don't see the whole story. So we only see what a person presents. And so in that cave scene, he is now defending a child that turns out to be his father. And so
Boom.
he is
Yeah.
seen.
I cried
Yeah.
on that part. I literally cried. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did you guys
And
do different scenarios before you picked that one? Did they consult with you and say, how should we do this? Or was that the first
no,
choice?
that is in the book. And so they were trying to be faithful to the book. And that's a very powerful scene with wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. And she takes him right there and goes like, "Ah, you're the judge. Here you are judging someone and you don't even know their story." And
That
and
was
here
probably
you
the
are.
most impactful part
Yeah.
of the whole entire movie because now you're right. You got to be the judge. So how are you going to judge him? How are you going to judge him? But you don't know the whole story. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is a brilliant book, brilliant movie. I'm thinking to myself, was this the first choice? Did they want to go to a different direction? What made them decide to
No,
just stick
first
with it?
choice.
Really?
First choice. And
Wow.
it's because of that. It's because as your eyes open up, as you begin to see a bigger world, this becomes front and center. What are you going to do about the person who now you've already decided is your enemy? And it's a beautiful thing. I'll tell you one little treasure about the movie that people don't realize. At the end, when Mackenzie's tears are poured out in the garden and this tree of life becomes
Yeah.
something that is
Yeah.
growing out of those tears. And you see the Trinity with Mackenzie in the middle. And they rolled camera. I mean, this is up in the mountains. There's, I don't know, 30 people there, the flower people and the lights people and all that. And everybody thinks this is special effects, but it's not.
What?
When they when they rolled camera, a huge butterfly comes out of the woods and lands on Mackenzie's nose. It's real. That is a real butterfly that is happening in that moment, and they caught it. Sam playing Mackenzie stayed in character. Well, he didn't have to. He was surprised, and everybody else stayed in character, like they knew that what was happening, and that's the shot they got, and that's the one in the movie is an actual real butterfly
Wow.
that lands on Mackenzie's nose.
Before we wrap up, first of all, I deeply appreciate you taking the time to come on and make yourself available in my universe at this moment, at this time, because I couldn't have asked for anything better. It was on my bucket list. I manifested, and evidently you heard it, and I really appreciate it because your story is definitely beautiful. And I encourage people who's never read the book, who never watched the movie, to go and do both because it definitely will make you think. I don't know if it'll change your life, but only you can do that, but it'll make you think. Before we wrap up, you're saying that you're doing another project. Tell me about this project and if you need our support or what do you need to make this manifest into the universe?
Ah, Let me say, Andre, I'm so honored to be with you. I'm so honored at the kindness that you've extended to me. I'm so grateful. I'm working on a sequel for The Shack, and that came out of about 6 years now, my relationship with a bunch of guys on death row who are truly friends of mine. And I could tell you story after story about that. But these brothers on death row opened up a possible storyline because I've already got a serial killer. I've already got a guy who's going to end up on death row. And it's like, all right, so how can I weave the extension of the existing story into that? And so that's something I'm working on. The manuscript will be and that it'll be complete by the end of January next year. And so it will probably come out at the end of next year, depending on what the publisher wants to do. So, yeah, when you see it coming, give me a holler. I'd love to talk about it, and maybe
Yes,
I'll
a
shoot you
question,
in a
Paul.
DM.
You're talking about death row inmates. And I
Yeah.
want to clear something with the viewers right off the bat. Don't judge. Don't judge because there's a purpose for what he's about to do. And I'm just like everybody else, but I have to always realize that when you're providing information, you're still dealing with the human mindset. So
Mhm.
most people would be like, why somebody with your resume will want to even pursue to do a backup sequel to such a great movie with inmates. I mean, could you elaborate on that a little bit? And like I said to the viewers who are listening and watching this, don't judge. There's a mission and a purpose for what he's about to do.
Yeah. And keep in mind, there are no rich people on death row. And uh, and so far, since I've known these guys, three of them have been proven to be innocent, and they've all of them have lived on death row for more than 28 years.
Wow.
And so there is a lot going on in terms of the world that they live in. There's a Greek word in the Bible for accusation, to be an accuser, and it's kategorizomai or kategoro, which we get the English word to categorize, to place people in a box rather than to get to know them. You just create a box. And I know that a lot of folks think about death row as a box without thinking about the fact that every one of those individuals is a story. And
Hmm.
I've taken some of my friends in there, and when they come out, they're blown away by the kindness and the goodness. None of those guys want to be a killer at the core of their being. But if you grew up in the kind of abuse and damage that they did, there is no guarantee that you wouldn't be there too. And so again, the story matters. And so it's an amazing journey. They call me up to encourage me, to just tell me what's going on. I had a friend of mine when Terry King, one of my friends on death row, he called me, and I had a group of other people that were at our house.
Mhm.
And so when that happens, I usually put Terry on a speaker or KB on a speaker, and so that they can meet my other friends.
Mhm.
And one of my friends has a major nonprofit with regard to a couple things. One is to help women and children who've been um, harmed, like physically mutilated by witch doctors in an African country,
Wow.
because there's all this stuff about putting parts of innocent children into the corners of buildings, as they're building it and stuff. And it's horrendous. And he helps not just rescue them, but to restore them. And he's also got a major activity against human trafficking. So KB, who's one of my friends on death row, was listening to this and started to ask questions and about this organization that Nate has. And at one point, Nate goes, "KB, you're really interested. Why?" He says, "Well, I want to support this." And Nate started to cry
Mm.
because here's a guy on death row. By the way, he's the only ordained pastor, inmate pastor of an existing church on death row called the Church of Life,
Real.
KB. Yeah. And he's been on death row for 32 years, I think now. And but KB is listening and his heart is touched and he's going like, and he's making 50 cents a day. And it's like, I really want to support what you're doing. And Nate, it just blew him away because it just seems so contradictory in his mind and the assumptions that he has. And all of us, we have to begin to look at the person in front of us, not in terms of the way they present themselves, because a lot of times they have no clue who they are, but in the truth of their being, rather than the ways of their being. And the truth of their being is that they're created in the image and likeness of God, or they're an expression of the universe, which is good and kind and right. And that's the truth of who they are. And when we begin to relate to people according to the truth of who they are and not just the ways of who they are, we will begin to see things change in this world for the better, for the good, for the right, for the just. And that is one moment at a time, responding to the one who's in front of us.
Paul, once again, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
time out of your day to come and bless us with your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.
Love you, bud.